today, and he left thinking this.
Am I going to get a vaccine? No.
Why not?
Because there's too many issues with these vaccines.
We are either going to get vaccinated and end the pandemic, or we are going to accept death.
That patient, Scott Rose, said, I don't want to take the vaccine because it's not fully approved. It's only under emergency use authorization. So I asked the doctor here, and he said, well, yes, so is the medicine that we use to treat it. So if you're willing to take that, you ought to consider taking the vaccine too. Nora?
An excellent point. David Begnaud, thank you. Well, there was quite a bit of drama on Capitol Hill today. It started with Speaker Nancy Pelosi blocking 2 Republicans from a special committee to investigate the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol. And what unfolded may have put the January 6th congressional probe in jeopardy. CBS's Nicole Killian reports.
More than 6 months after a mob stormed the Capitol, there's a new battle over the fate of a select committee established to investigate the attack. In a bold move, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected 2 of the 5 Republicans on the panel, Ohio's Jim Jordan and Indiana's Jim Banks. The Speaker suggested the 2 staunch allies of the former president who voted against certifying the election would jeopardize the integrity of the investigation. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy shot back immediately, threatening to pull all 5 members.
It's an egregious abuse of power. Pelosi has broken this institution.
But Congressman Jordan and Banks had both criticized the panel yesterday, calling it another attempt to impeach Mr. Trump.
This is impeachment round 3 for the Democrats.
Wyoming Republican Liz Cheney, appointed by Democrats, remains on the committee.
The rhetoric around this from the minority leader and from those 2 members has been disgraceful. This must be an investigation that is focused on facts.
Democratic committee members say they plan to proceed with their first hearing next Tuesday with testimony from law enforcement officers who were on the front lines as part of their probe to get to the root causes of the riot.
This is serious business here. This isn't a game.
And Nicole joins us from Capitol Hill with more information. I understand there's an update on the president's $1 trillion infrastructure plan. What's happening?
That's right. Senate Republicans blocked a roughly $1 trillion package that would fund roads, bridges, and other projects because it's still being negotiated. It is a key part of President Biden's agenda, and a small bipartisan group of lawmakers say they are very close to finalizing the details in the coming days. Nora?
A critical week. Nicole Killian, thank you. Tonight, those explosive wildfires in the West are threatening millions of Americans with potential health problems. Smoke from those fires has drifted across the country, sending air quality levels plummeting. And Pacific Gas and Electric says it will bury 10,000 miles of power lines in what's being described as the largest infrastructure project in California history. Here's CBS's Jonathan Vigliotti.
Crews are fighting the flames of the Tamarack fire from the ground and sky. Located south of Lake Tahoe, the blaze is 0% contained and has grown, crossing state lines into Nevada.
We got 10 minutes to get in and get what we can get, and then it's time to leave.
Extreme heat and drought have also created tinderbox conditions in southwest Oregon, where the bootleg fire has burned more than 394,000 acres. Crews from Arkansas, Nevada, and Alaska are joining more than 2,000 personnel battling the fire there. Today, California utility PG&E pledged to bury 10,000 miles of its power lines after its equipment possibly touched off the Dixie Fire near the town of Paradise. 78 active wildfires are burning in the West. Those flames, coupled with the Canadian wildfires, are blanketing much of the United States with noxious smoke, affecting air quality and triggering health alerts thousands of miles away.
If fires are a more frequent thing, if they are more intense, we could very well see more of these kind of events.
Doctors say breathing in fine particulate matter released by wildfires can increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes.
And one study found wildfire smoke like this actually becomes up to 4 times more toxic the farther it travels because of a chemical reaction that takes place in the atmosphere. Doctors say one simple way to protect yourself is by wearing an N95 mask. Nora?
Jonathan Vigliotti, thank you. Tonight, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, is making her way to the Summer Olympics in Tokyo. The Games are just getting underway amid a COVID emergency that is threatening to grind the Olympics to a halt. And CBS's Jamie Yukas is there.
As the games begin, COVID infections continue. U.S. volleyballer Taylor Crabb reportedly tested positive after landing in Tokyo, bringing to 5 the total number of Americans knocked out of the Olympics by the virus. In all, more than 70 people connected to the 2020 Games have tested positive. The first matches of the Tokyo Games started with players on 5 women's soccer teams, including the Americans, taking a knee before kickoffs to protest racial inequality worldwide, all permitted under new Olympic rules.
There's no violation of the Rule 50. This is expressively what has been mentioned in these guidelines.
The U.S. suffered a crushing shutout loss to Sweden, the same team that kept Team USA from gold at the last Olympics. Meanwhile, the FBI today put out a general warning against potential cyber attacks at the games that could include threats to block or disrupt live broadcasts, but said there's been no specific threat. With Tokyo COVID cases the highest since January, the head of the World Health Organization today called the games a celebration of hope.
May the message of hope resound from Tokyo around the world.
With games beginning ahead of opening ceremonies on Friday, the focus is turning to competition, which officials hope will not get overshadowed by COVID. Nora?
SIOUX, thank you. Tonight, a landmark settlement agreement in the opioid epidemic. A group of state attorneys general reached a $26 billion settlement with Johnson & Johnson and 3 other American companies that distributed opioid painkillers, even as addiction and overdose deaths skyrocketed. States now have 30 days to decide whether to agree to the deal, and local governments will have 150 days to sign on. We want to turn now to a CBS News investigation into the spike in edible marijuana overdoses among children. That's right, gummies and other sweets containing a potent ingredient meant for adults are sending kids to emergency rooms in record numbers. Here's CBS.
Which is get the vaccine.
If you have the chance, get the shot.
But if
it'll save your life.
Well, a shift in tone in the right-wing media when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine. Fox and Friends host Steve Doocy talking over his co-host to encourage viewers to get vaccinated. Doocy has been advocating the benefits of the vaccine since the winter, but now other Fox News hosts are following suit.
I believe in science.
Sean Hannity, who in January said he was beginning to have doubts about getting the shot, made this plea to viewers this week.
Now, just like we've been saying, please take COVID seriously. I can't say it enough. Enough people have died.
The CEO of the far-right network Newsmax, Chris Ruddy, published an op-ed saying he's been vaccinated and writing President Biden should be, quote, applauded for his administration's vaccine efforts. That shift in tone coincides with the Delta variant tearing across the U.S., hitting conservative-leaning states especially hard, where vaccination rates are some of the lowest in the country.
It's safe and effective. I took it and I wanted to show the picture to just encourage people.
Now some Republican lawmakers are being more outspoken in their effort to encourage people to get the shots. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise announced he got the first dose of the vaccine on Sunday after seeing the COVID cases rise due to the Delta variant.
I was ready to get the vaccine. I've always felt it was safe and effective.
In his state of Louisiana, only 36% of people are fully vaccinated, and the daily case rate is 3 times the national average. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who survived polio and has consistently advocated for people to get vaccinated, did not mince words this week.
This is not complicated. 97% of the people who are in the hospital now for COVID are unvaccinated. So if there's anybody out there willing to listen, get vaccinated.
But there are still a number of Republican lawmakers who do not face any public rebuke from their Republican peers for pushing vaccine lies.
Now they're starting to talk about going door to door to be able to take vaccines to the people. They could then go door to door, take your guns. They can go door to door, take your Bibles. Yeah.
And again, that's the other key thing, Jim. We're not seeing that public rebuke of their fellow Republican colleagues who are still putting out disinformation about the vaccine. And all of this happening as we're hearing from the Capitol attending physician here on the Hill saying that the Delta variant has been detected, asking anyone who hasn't been vaccinated to come get the vaccine. And all of that unfolding as we still know that some Republican members either aren't sharing their vaccination status or haven't been vaccinated. Jim?
It's important to get those vaccines. They do work. All right, Jessica Dean, thank you very much for that. Stay with us. We're just a little over an hour away from tonight's exclusive CNN town hall with President Biden. And next, legal trouble for another prominent associate of former President Trump. This makes 11 who face criminal charges. What does it mean for Trump himself?
I feel it.
Now, we have the meat. Tonight, that doesn't mean that this won't happen. She's on the Hill tonight.
Tonight, Senate Republicans unanimously blocking an effort to move forward on a bipartisan infrastructure package. Collins, no. Republicans say they needed more time to finalize a deal, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer took a gamble, forcing a vote to jumpstart the process.
Even Republicans have agreed that the deadline has moved them far more quickly.
Lawmakers have been working to reach a deal on a $1.2 trillion package. How long are you willing to give these bipartisan negotiations?
My fear is that we could see a repetition of what we saw with the Affordable Care Act, where discussions went on and on and on and never went anyplace.
Schumer's gamble may have paid off. Some Republicans say they want a deal by the weekend. And if there's a vote Monday, you will vote yes?
We're going to finish it.
And in a statement tonight, that bipartisan group of senators says that they have made significant progress. Just moments ago, President Biden was asked if he thinks they will reach a deal. The president responding, yes, we will. David?
Rachel Scott tracking it all, as always. Thank you, Rachel. When we come back here, the severe storms across the Northeast as we were coming on tonight. Thunderstorms, heavy rain, and hail. And what about the smoke-filled skies in the east from the fires in the west? Rob Marciano standing by with it all.
Be about it for the rain chances tonight. Very isolated in nature, very short-lived, and really the next several days are going to be pretty quiet out there. Temperatures are in the 80s, so it's not overly hot out there. It's about where we should be at this time of the year. Well, if you're in Pierre, it's overly hot a little bit. Temperature right now of 100 degrees. You factor in the humidity and the temperature, what it feels like is just a couple degrees warmer than what the actual air temperature is, because the dew points are in the 60s, and in some cases, like earlier this evening in Sheldon, the dew point was around 70. And unfortunately, the humidity levels and the heat levels are going to be coming up in the next few days. So it's more than certain, at least for parts of the Dakota News Now area, could see some heat alerts for Thursday and Friday. The one saving grace is we do have a little bit of a breeze coming in out of the south at about roughly 10 to 20 miles per hour, a little to the west and a little to the east. Those winds are about 5 to 15, but the winds are going to be on the breezier side throughout the night tonight. And again, just a couple isolated scattered showers, maybe a rumble of thunder this evening, but that's going to be it in terms of rain chances for tonight. Here's 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and throughout the day tomorrow, mostly looking at dry conditions again, maybe again an isolated pop-up shower in the afternoon and evening, but again, staying very dry even into Friday. But Friday, though, we will see a front move through, and I think that'll at least increase the chances of a few more widely scattered showers and thunderstorms, and also too, humidity levels will be a little bit higher as well. But this might be our best chance of rain over the next week or so, because looking at the next 5 days, we're not looking at much rain at all. Maybe up to 1/10 of an inch at most in some spots. There's a couple areas of dark green you're seeing there. That's maybe upwards of a 1/4 inch of rain, but really it's going to be pretty dry for quite some time, and it looks like it's going to stay that way, and you'll see that here on that 10-day forecast, because we're staying pretty dry the next 3 days in Sioux Falls, minus a slight chance of rain Friday night. Sunday we will have a chance of a few showers and storms that will cool us back just a little bit to 92, but then temperatures build back again into the middle of next week, maybe pushing 100 degrees by next Wednesday. After that, we start to cool back off a little bit, and there may be signs that we at least see temperatures falling back closer to average for this time of the year. Aberdeen will have a couple isolated chances for showers and thunderstorms, but again,
It was surprising that Nancy Pelosi made this mistake, but also interesting that Republicans did such a good job of capitalizing on that mistake she made.
Guy, whether it was a mistake or not, the effort to
get to 60 votes to start the debate on an infrastructure bipartisan proposal, a bill, fell short today. Republicans said, listen, it wasn't us. The bill wasn't there. Senator John Thune talking to Neil Cavuto today.
There's a framework, but it's not done. And let me reiterate, there is no final text. There was no bill to vote on. And so Republicans were perfectly right, in my view, all 50 of us, to vote against the motion to proceed to the bill today, which we haven't seen because it hasn't been written. When we have something written to review, then I think this process can begin to move forward. But in the meantime, the negotiators are working through some of the final issues, and we'll see what they come up with.
You know, when I go around the country, this is the thing people hate. They just hate the show votes. They hate the vote that's not, they know is not going to pass. They hate that about Washington.
Yeah, so my last answer was about a misstep from the Speaker of the House. This was a misstep from Leader Schumer in the Senate. This was the easiest argument for every Republican in the Senate to come together and make, and we just heard it there from Thune. Of course we're not going to vote to proceed to debate a bill that doesn't exist, based on some completely phony, made-up deadline from the Democrats and Chuck Schumer. It looks like they missed another one of their deadlines on the reconciliation package, $3.5 trillion. So this was the easy one for Republicans. The harder question for Republican senators, they should think hard about this, even if they support this bipartisan infrastructure package or agreement that's almost finalized, and I think it's relatively good in isolation. Do they want to go along with it and give the patina of bipartisanship if what the Democrats and the White House are doing is to put those two issues together, the reconciliation bill and the infrastructure bill, in this shocking, totally reckless orgy of spending? Do they want to sort of validate that in any way on the Republican side? And I think that's an active debate within the caucus.
Where is that debate, Mara? Because obviously some Republicans want to go home and say, listen, I hate this administration, I hate what they're doing on big spending, but I got this bridge done.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that the bipartisan infrastructure framework, sometimes it's called BIF, has survived as long as it has. And even today, members of the negotiating group, including Republicans, are saying we're almost there. We only need till Monday. We just weren't ready to do it today, but we could take this vote on Monday. I think something like 21 Republicans signed a letter saying that. So this has a lot of support among Republicans, more than I would think, because of what Guy just laid out. If you support this, you're definitely giving President Biden the opportunity to say, see, I made Congress work again. Bipartisan compromise is possible. That's what he ran on. But, you know, so it's still alive. And we'll know a lot more next week if it's going to go forward.
All right, I want to turn to this story that Fox News did exclusively, and that is this teaching network, the abolitionist teaching network that the Department of Education kind of linked to schools. Take a listen to this, and I'll read the Department of Education response.
Abolitionist teaching network, a network that is dedicated to not creating new schools or reimagining schools, but destroying schools that do nothing but harm Black and brown children.
I fully believe in diversity and inclusion, but what I do not believe and I do not stand for is this thought process that the country is irreparably racist and that white people are irreparably racist and there's nothing they can ever do except become anti-racist and address their white fragility. That is insane. It is divisive. It is not going to help our country become the more perfect union, which we frankly already are.
And again, this is different than critical race theory, which obviously we've been covering as well. But the Department of Education statement on ATN reporting says the department does not endorse the recommendations of this group, nor do they reflect our policy positions. It was an error in a lengthy document to include this citation. Molly, the document went out to schools.
Yeah, the document went out to schools.
Molly.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The reason why Republicans in the House think they're going to have a very good year next year isn't just because of some of the political missteps that Democrats are making, but also their embrace of these ideas that America is an irreparably racist and evil nation, that white people are oppressors, that Black people are victims. No average American likes this rhetoric. Nobody, whether they're Black or white, likes to view people in this very racist way. But the left has been putting forth a lot of these racist ideas, and they're using the and the bureaucracy to push them forward. I think the fact that the Department of Education pulled back a little bit, I mean, it's not much because they have so many other of these racist ideologies that they're trying to push through at the school level, at local schools. It is an indication that probably Democrats are getting a feel for just how toxic this new racism of the left is and how un-American it is and how people don't like it and they don't like it being foisted on their children.
Yeah, Mara, quickly, I mean, even in an election coming up in Virginia, all of that is factoring into a governor's race there.
Sure, but what we don't know is whether any school actually picked up on this, used it. This is a link in a report that now the Department of Education says it was a mistake. I agree, the political damage has been done, and Republicans will make this out to be this huge thing, but you know, it's something that Democrats have to watch for.
All right.
We can see this only because I'm short on time, and you're a big leader, but you know, it's not a Venezuela interview. But let me give you one final thing. I got 30 seconds. I'm reading you a quote from Mitch McConnell this week. We need shots in everybody's arm, or we're going to be back in a situation like the fall. Is McConnell right or wrong to say that?
He's completely wrong. What we need to do when it comes to battling this terrible Chinese corona is make sure that people take command of their own health. And the best piece of news, which you didn't talk about with Fauci, which I wish you had, is the therapeutics that are available for people who get sick. What we're seeing, and with the doctors I talk to, is great success with the therapeutics that are leading older people and people who have underlying conditions.
I'm over on time.
Help.
I'm over on time. It's not personal. I can't take from the next hour. We covered ground. Matt Schlapp, as always, thanks for coming on the beat. We'll have you back. Quick break right now.
Otezla is associated with an increased risk of depression. Tell your doctor.
I can tell that they use your milk material.
And I'm certainly determined that we should continue to work with all the relevant agencies, the police, social services, to improve our response. And I will be very happy to take up his offer and ensure that he gets the meeting that he needs.
Dad, can we talk about something other than work? It's the weekend.
Yeah. When UFC 265, pay-per-view for free. That's on August 7th. No cost to play. ESPN.com.
Wait, what do you think happened?
Bankruptcies, it's not just shutdowns, for not just United, but the entire airline industry. Even the best of the best, Southwest Air, which I'll be talking to tomorrow.
Fireplace around.
Amazing offer. Your home improvement company where it's your home.
He's also a staff writer for The New Yorker and author of Joe Biden, The Life, The Run, and What Matters Now. Evan, thanks so much for being with us. 6 months into the presidency of Joe Biden, the president faces a series of very big challenges. COVID resurgence, stalled legislation, new foreign policy hurdles, trying to get out of Afghanistan without things blowing up there. How do you expect him to address these challenges at this town hall tonight?
Well, if you compare it to where he was, say, 4 or 5 months ago, the last time he did a CNN town hall, it's interesting. At that point, he was saying, we've got to pass the American Relief Act. We've got to begin to American Rescue Act. We've got to try to get things going. We've got to try to put Donald Trump in the rearview mirror. To some degree, he's made good on those promises. Obviously, big COVID Relief Act. People are happy about it. Even Republicans who voted against it in some cases are taking credit for it. But you also have now the Delta variant beginning to storm its way back. And part of his message tonight is to appeal to people and say, look, this is on us. If you want to get this over with, you can't expect the government to do it alone. You need to be a part of it.
And you've researched and written about President Biden's career. What experience do you think he's going to draw on during this pivotal moment in his presidency? Because he has not, I think the one thing that voters entrusted to him more than anything was defeating COVID. And this resurgence of COVID in the Delta variant, I think, puts that somewhat in jeopardy, does it not? That promise and that hope that a lot of Americans had for his presidency.
That's been the signature hallmark of his presidency so far. And part of his message tonight is to say, if we want that, if you like being able to go see your grandparents, if you like being able to get your kids back into school, this is on all of us. This is about getting that vaccine and putting this in the rearview mirror. It's also about him appealing directly to the American public. You know, there's a great statistic to it. If you go back to the very beginning of the administration, 71% of Americans said they wanted to see Republicans cooperate with Joe Biden, try to break through some of the paralysis. We haven't seen that happen. And what he's going to do today is say to people, You can put pressure on your lawmakers, try to make this happen.
And I wonder how much voting rights and this rollback on voting that we've seen in some of these states around the country, and whether or not that comes up tonight. That's a big challenge for this president because progressives want him to go harder on that issue.
You're absolutely right, and you heard him give that big speech just recently where he said this is the responsibility of our generation to see this through. It's unconscionable not to work on it. He also, of course, said he wasn't, or he indicated, didn't give any sign that he was going to get rid of the filibuster and push for that. That is also a recognition that he knows that some moderates, people he'll need in 2022 and ultimately in 2024 for Democrats, that they're uneasy about the idea of getting rid of the filibuster. So he's trying to meet both of those constituents.
Yeah, he'll be walking a
Corporate greed exposed. The powerful held accountable with in-depth.
This is Dakota News Now.
Good evening, I'm Andrea Anderson.
Glad to have you with us at 6 o'clock. I'm Brian Allen. Finding housing has been tough these last few months with very few options available. It's also putting a strain on anyone searching for an apartment to rent.
Kevin.
Tonight, new worries about the spread of the Delta variant, a controversial study raising concern about the effectiveness of the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine as the battle over vaccinating healthcare workers heats up, with so many still not protected. And with hospitals seeing a surge of the unvaccinated, we return to one center where most of the COVID patients are young. Also, the heartbreaking loss of a 5-year-old boy. Our alarming look at the wildfire and climate emergency, more intense than ever. A smoky haze spreading across the country, the threat only increasing. What can be done to help slow the extreme effects? Plus, incredible scenes of people trapped in deadly and unprecedented flooding. The bombshell today from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a new battle in Congress over the committee to investigate the deadly January riot. Olympic countdown competition kicks off for Team USA 2 days before the opening ceremony as another athlete tests positive. Our exclusive new reporting on COVID misinformation, code words being used to get around social media bans. And he's the new king of the court, the NBA champion, and his personal story, truly inspiring America.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, I'm Kate Snow in for Lester tonight, and this is where we're at tonight. 1,000 new COVID infections are being reported in this country every hour. The focus is again on the spread of the Delta variant and how best to fight it. A small controversial new study is calling into question the effectiveness of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine against that Delta variant, but that study has limitations. What there is no doubt about is the effect the Delta variant is having on the unvaccinated and even in rare cases on children. With many healthcare workers across the country still unvaccinated today, the nation's largest city announced it would require workers in city-run hospitals to get the COVID shot. Our Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
As the U.S. sees 1,000 new COVID infections every hour, a new study suggests that the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine may be less effective against the Delta variant, and that the 13 million people who've received it may need a booster. The CDC does not recommend that, and the study is facing backlash because it's not been peer-reviewed and has a very small sample size of 27 people. J&J says its own studies show its vaccine does offer strong protection.
This was a very small study done in a laboratory, not in a real-world environment, and other studies have shown that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the real world has proven very effective, particularly at preventing severe illness, hospitalizations, and deaths.
Tonight, growing concern over the highly contagious strain. Today, New York City announced it will now require all 42,000 employees of city-run hospitals to be vaccinated or get weekly COVID tests.
I do believe that it will be beneficial in the end, especially because, as the healthcare workers, we need to be the ones that be protected to take care of patients.
42% of them have not gotten the shot. At a Jacksonville hospital we visited this week, 40% hadn't. Across the country, about 1 in 4 healthcare workers are still unvaccinated.
This is about keeping people safe and stopping the Delta variant.
Tonight, a family is mourning the loss of 5-year-old Wyatt Gibson, who they say died from COVID complications. His father, a Georgia sheriff's deputy. Wyatt's relatives, too heartbroken to speak on camera, wanted us to show this home video to remember the exuberant, enthusiastic, and loving little boy who died much too soon in his mother's arms. They say he had no underlying health conditions. Still, serious COVID complications and deaths among children are extremely rare. Of the more than 600,000 COVID deaths in the U.S., only 493 were under 18.
And Gabe, there's new information about breakthrough cases when someone vaccinated gets infected.
Yeah, Kate, breakthrough cases are still a very small percentage of the total, but the CDC now says that more than 5,400 people have either been hospitalized or died from COVID after getting vaccinated. 3/4 of them were age 65 and older, Kate.
All right, Gabe, thank you. In a growing number of hospitals, we're seeing disturbing and eerily familiar scenes as they see an influx of COVID patients, most of them unvaccinated, most of them young. Ellison Barber returned to one hospital in South Carolina.
Give you the best chance possible.
A year ago, the COVID ICU at Lexington Medical Center was pushed to the brink. This week, doctors say it's feeling like deja vu.
We could very easily be back in a similar situation.
This man is the newest COVID patient admitted to the ICU, and Dr. Philip Keith is trying to figure out if he needs to be on a ventilator.
There's a very high likelihood he'll require, more invasive care.
Around the corner is another COVID patient, just 26 years old, receiving a plasma exchange because some of his organs are failing.
A week ago, there were 0 COVID patients in this hospital's ICU. Today, there are 9, and 4 of them are on ventilators, the vast majority unvaccinated.
Obesity would be their only probably diagnosis of some. Others have no conditions at all, and otherwise, really the only link is that they're not vaccinated.
Almanzo Cromer was one of Dr. Keith's COVID patients, hospitalized for nearly 2 months. Almanzo was eligible to get vaccinated early in the year, but didn't. Now he'll tell anyone who will listen.
Go ahead and get the vaccination, because the COVID is for real. Like, it had me on my dying bed.
Statewide COVID hospitalizations have increased by 103% in less than a month.
What I would ask from our community is, again, continue to understand the vaccine. The benefit outweigh the risk 100 to 1.
Ellison Barber, NBC News, West Columbia, South Carolina.
You can make a plan for when and where to get vaccinated. Visit planyourvaccine.com for more.
Two of McCarthy's picks, she upped the ante, setting off a chain of events that seems to have dashed, for now at least, the last hope this country has for any kind of bipartisan investigation. So who does that hurt the most? Well, it hurts the family of fallen Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. In a moment, I'm going to speak to Sicknick's longtime partner, Sandra Garza. It hurts the more than 100 officers who were injured during that riot. It hurts every American who watched in horror on January 6th as our Capitol was attacked by a mob of Trump supporters and deserves and needs to know who, what, when, and why. Ryan Nobles is out front on Capitol Hill. And Ryan, Speaker Pelosi is still going full steam ahead with the committee, but obviously now you've got no Republicans on it. Now she could ask McCarthy and Jordan to testify. Tell me where this goes from here.
Yeah, well, from the very beginning, Aaron, the members of this committee, the chairman, Benny Thompson, has said that they're going to go wherever this investigation leads them. And that could include calling witnesses like the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, the former President Donald Trump, or even Jim Jordan to testify in front of the committee about their role as to what happened on January 6th. And after everything that we saw today, the back and forth between both sides, there doesn't appear to be any wavering in that commitment to finding the truth. In fact, Liz Cheney, who remains the sole Republican on this panel now, appointed by Speaker Pelosi, doubled down on her commitment to this committee. She even suggested that Jim Jordan, who was one of the picks by Kevin McCarthy, could be what she called a material witness to what happened on that day, meaning that she's open to calling him before the panel. And then I also caught up with Jamie Raskin of Maryland, who's also a member of this select committee. And I specifically said, would you call Trump or McCarthy in front of this panel? And he said, they're going to go wherever the investigation leads. And he said, and I thought this was interesting, Aaron, he said, quote, if people were not involved in the attack or the insurrection or the plot to overthrow the electoral count process, then they don't have anything to worry about. And this was after I specifically asked him about Trump and McCarthy. So this committee is going to move forward, and their first hearing is next week. Aaron.
All right. Thank you very much.
And it's really a outreach to the public for parents and students to understand this career track. There's not only the wind techs, but we also need electricians, welders, truck drivers, host of careers here that not only support the wind industry, but also the electric utility industry also.
Brett Citrowski with Renew Energy says there is a growing demand for these types of jobs.
A need for quality technicians, people that are eager to work, people that are willing to get paid a healthy amount of money, because that's definitely part of being a traveling technician. But there is an absolute need for technicians in pretty much every category of wind company within South Dakota.
And they hope this event will highlight some of those careers.
It's a great career track, and quite frankly, it's an outreach, but it's also a celebration of that career track. The public needs to understand how good these jobs really are.
In Sioux Falls, Sarah McDonald, KELO News.
Now, this free event runs until 7 tonight. There are about 12 employers there, as well as technical colleges.
South Dakota high schools will have a new website for sports and fine arts information this fall. You are looking at the South Dakota High School Activities Association's new webpage. Some new features include options for more statistics, linking to social media accounts, and an app to follow certain schools. Officials told KELO News that the new website will allow schools to promote and showcase teams and activities throughout the year. You can find out how the new website will help parents, coaches, and students in a KELOLand.com original by Eric Mayer.
Bit hotter, a bit more humid tomorrow and Friday. We'll have your weekend forecast next.
Even areas that are seeing rain are still impacted by the drought. We'll explain after the break.
The exclusive sponsor of KELOLand News at 6 is on.
Another weather disaster to tell you about. Dozens are dead in China tonight after unprecedented flooding brought on by torrential rain, some losing their lives in subways as they filled with water. Janice Mackey-Freyer's in China with late details.
Tonight, stunning scenes in a subway in central China. Passengers trapped inside flooded train cars, posting horrifying videos to social media. My phone will run out of power soon, she says. The water rising higher, others clinging to handles. It took hours for rescuers to reach them. A dozen people didn't make it out alive. Across the city of Zhengzhou, people were stranded. Kids floated out of a kindergarten in plastic bins. Nearly a year's worth of rain falling in just 3 days, what forecasters called a once-in-a-thousand-years event. The torrential rain has forced 100,000 people to relocate. As China's army scrambles to shore up dams, now at risk of bursting.
This catastrophic flooding adds to a grim roster of extreme weather across the globe, what scientists link to climate change, and there is more rain in the forecast. Kate?
Janice, thank you. A battle in Congress tonight over a committee to investigate the deadly January riot at the Capitol. The top House Republican pulling his picks for the commission after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in an unprecedented move, refused to seat two Republicans. Garrett Hake is on Capitol Hill.
Tonight, a committee in chaos.
It's an egregious abuse of power. Pelosi has broken this institution.
Republican leader Kevin McCarthy withdrawing all of his selections for the January 6th special committee after Speaker Pelosi announced she would reject two of his choices for the panel. Republicans now calling the committee a sham, while Democrats vow to push ahead.
We have a bipartisan quorum. We can proceed.
The Speaker writing that her unprecedented decision to not seat Ohio's Jim Jordan or Indiana's Jim Banks was necessary to protect the integrity of the investigation.
The fact that she has rejected two recommendations for two members who have indicated that they are not supportive of the objective of the Select Committee is consistent with how serious this committee is and how important it is to have patriots serving on this committee, not partisans.
Now, just one Republican remains on the committee, Wyoming's Liz Cheney, appointed by the Speaker alongside 7 Democrats, tonight defending the investigation to come.
This must be an investigation that is focused on facts, and the idea that any of this has become politicized is really unworthy of the office that we all hold and unworthy of our republic.
The committee's first hearing featuring D.C. and Capitol Police officers is still scheduled for Tuesday morning, now likely with 5 empty seats on the Republican side. Kate?
Garrett, thank you. A mix of victory and defeat for Team USA as the games get underway in Tokyo. Also news that another American athlete has tested positive for COVID. We've also learned which American athletes will carry the flag at the opening ceremony in just 2 days' time. Our Tom Yamas is there.
Now's the time. For 5 years, the U.S. women's soccer team has been thinking about this game. Ever since Sweden knocked them out in Rio. But it was not the result they wanted.
Sweden are taking Team USA apart here in Tokyo.
A stunning 3-0 loss.
We know this wasn't our best. I think we beat ourselves a lot.
The U.S. softball team starting stronger, with games getting underway in Fukushima, topping Italy 2-0.
It was pure excitement to finally be back on this stage and get it going for us.
With the opening ceremony 2 days away, Japanese jets practiced riding Olympic rings in the sky. And Team USA chose its flag bearers. For the first time, there will be two. Baseball player Eddie Alvarez, who already has a silver medal in speed skating, and WNBA star Sue Bird.
For you, what does that flag represent during this pandemic?
As an athlete, I'm just always wanting our country to be better. So when I hold that flag, that's really what it's going to represent to me.
But it's heartbreak for another American. Beach volleyball player Taylor Crabb testing positive for COVID. Infections here up 150% from last week. More than 1,800 new cases on Wednesday. To stay safe, triathlete Katie Zafiris is training on her balcony in the athletes' village.
It's really nice to just feel united with all the other countries that are here, and just seeing everybody come together in a safe way during COVID is just really exciting to see that we can do this, we can pull it off.
And Kate, tonight we've learned even though there won't be spectators at the opening ceremony, there will be athletes. About 40% of Team USA will be there. That's more than 230 U.S. Olympians. Kate?
Looking forward to it, Tom. Thank you. Harvey Weinstein entered a Los Angeles courtroom today in a wheelchair and wearing a prison jumpsuit. The former Hollywood producer pleading not guilty to 11 counts of sexual assault against 5 women. Weinstein was extradited yesterday from New York, where he's serving 23 years for rape. Up next, an NBC News exclusive, the tricks anti-vaxxers are using to spread misinformation.
Over the last, let's say, 6 hours or so. And we do have these clouds that have been moving through from west to east, but not producing much in the way of precipitation. And there's a little precip out there in a couple of spots here. Here's a look at First Alert Live Doppler radar. There's some rain right along I-29 there, so let's take a little closer look at this. You know, I haven't done this in a while, this hand tracker thing, because we haven't had much rainfall to look at. But anyway, here's a look at some of that rainfall around the Brookings area up toward Watertown, and also, you know, maybe Sisseton, places like that. This is really not amounting to all that much. It's drifting off to the south and east, moving quickly through, and I really doubt that all this is actually making it down to the ground. But if it is, it's not amounting to very much. It's kind of a tease out there, probably just, you know, settling the dust a little bit across portions of, you know, northeastern portions of South Dakota here. So let me get here. I'm having a problem here. Okay, let me go. I'm going to back up a little bit now and show you the temperatures and the dew points here. So this is what it feels like across the area. 80s and 90s, and the reason it feels a little warmer than the actual temperature is because the dew points are in the mid to upper 60s, especially in southeastern portions of South Dakota, southwest Minnesota, northwest Iowa. Not quite as high across western portions of the area. And the wind right now, it's pretty breezy out there. We haven't had too many breezy days lately. In fact, it's just windy in places like Pierre. That south wind around 25 miles an hour, 22 miles an hour in winter. Meanwhile, on the breezy side in the east, 17 miles an hour in Sioux Falls, 14 miles an hour in Watertown. You know, a lot of times people ask me, what's the difference between breezy and windy? Well, I guess it's just a matter of perspective, I guess. Usually I think if it's, you know, 10 to 20 miles an hour, to me that's breezy. Anything higher than 20 miles an hour, we just call that windy. So I guess it's up to you.
Or when I have, when I go outside. But I do wear a mask if I'm in a room with other people, many of whom may not be vaccinated, or I don't know their vaccination status. I wear a mask inside restaurants and stores. Anytime there's a gathering and you don't know the vaccination status of the people around you, I think it's prudent to wear a mask. Also, if you have family members who are more at risk, children who cannot be vaccinated, or sick family members, or you yourself, are at a higher risk because you're older or you're immunocompromised. I think all of these situations and settings are is when I would recommend wearing a mask, even if you're fully vaccinated.
Talked about if your immune system is somehow compromised.
Should those people be thinking about getting an extra shot, a third dose if you've got the mRNA vaccines? And along those lines, are people thinking, what's the latest thinking about booster shots?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most common questions I've been getting these days. You know, with a 50% vaccination rate around the United States and the Delta variant spreading, there is definitely an urgency to get more people vaccinated. But I'm not convinced that a third dose is what we need right now. First of all, the science is not really there about whether it's warranted for the general population. Perhaps it is for vulnerable people or those who are immunocompromised. But I also want to point out something, looking at it through a public health lens or a health equity lens. We need more people in the United States and across the world to get their first and second shot, not to start worrying about getting a third shot. So if you think globally, for example, for every one person being vaccinated in a low-income country, about 117 people get vaccinated in a high-income country. And this is the type of inequity that is hurting all of us. If we want to slow down the pandemic, and I think we all do, the priority should be to get people to get their first and second shots as soon as possible, rather than start worrying about providing a third dose to some people who already had a full dose of the vaccine.
Dr. Ronit Mashori of Georgetown University, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
The consequences of extreme weather are here and unmistakable. Scientists say human-caused climate change is making these events more frequent and severe. Miles O'Brien examines a pivotal upcoming moment in addressing the climate crisis. It is part of our collaboration with Covering Climate Now, a consortium of media organizations reporting on climate change.
There's a new cop on the climate beat, and he's pushing hard to hold the usual suspects accountable. Alok Sharma is president of the 26th Conference of Parties, or COP26. COPs are the summits where the real heavy lifting gets done to mount a global campaign to arrest the climate emergency. COP26 will be held in Glasgow, Scotland this November. Sharma calls it a last chance to avoid the worst effects of climate change. What do you consider your biggest challenge as president of COP26?
I think that the biggest challenge is ensuring that we are persuading countries to come forward with ambitious commitments.
Nearly 3/4 of nations in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change have now pledged net zero carbon emissions by 2050.
Everyone needs to play their part. The overarching message that I would like to come out of COP26 is that we have credibly done enough as a world to keep 1.5 within reach.
1.5, as in degrees Celsius, or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the amount of warming above pre-industrial levels set as a desired goal in the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, which the Trump administration reneged on and the Biden administration rejoined.
I'm very pleased that we have an administration that is back on the front line in the fight against climate change. I think it was particularly telling that one of the first executive orders that President Biden signed was on rejoining the Paris Agreement. I think this was a real message to the world. The US is back, and the US is going to work alongside other countries in tackling climate change.
The climate has already warmed more than 1 degree Celsius in the industrial era, and the evident effects are multiplying. The heat wave in the Pacific Northwest and the flooding in Germany, just two of the most recent deadly events linked to a warming planet.
The last decade was the hottest on record, and that's why I think it's vital that the world comes together in November so that we can reach agreement, we can reach consensus, and we can say with credibility that we've kept 1.5 alive.
Rich nations
or contingency in the Taiwan Strait. Thank you. So on the importance of freedom of navigation of the seas and the skies, this is really important, not only to the United States of America, but to all of our allies and partners in the region and around the world. And so what we have done and what we will continue to do is to work with our allies and partners to make sure that we can navigate the skies and the seas to the degree that we should have the right to, in accordance with international law. And so our emphasis will remain on that, and our emphasis will also remain on making sure that we keep those alliances strong and that our allies and partners know that they can count on us going forward. And that's the message that I'll take to the theater.
And I think to answer your question on Taiwan, the geostrategic nature of the globe has been changing for quite some time, and we're in the middle of that change as well. And as we go forward, China is the pacing threat for us in uniform, the United States, and it's been directed now by the Secretary of Defense, the President, and the previous as well. So we are gearing our capabilities, our programs, our training, our knowledge, our skills, our attributes, etc., militarily with China in mind. There's no question about it. And we will work very closely with Japan, with other countries, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, other allies and partners in the region to ensure that we have the proper capability to deal with it, whatever comes to us in the future.
Thanks, everybody. I'm afraid we have to go now. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. No, sorry, we got to go. Sorry about that. As always. Defend the teaching of
C-SPAN is your unfiltered view of government. We're funded by these television companies and more, including WOW.
The world has changed. Today, a fast, reliable internet connection is something no one can live without. So WOW is there for our customers with speed, reliability, value, and choice. Now more than ever, it all starts with great internet.
WOW. WOW supports C-SPAN as a public service, along with these other television providers, giving you a front row seat to democracy.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. And coming up Thursday morning, Ohio Republican Congressman Warren Davidson discusses President Biden's and congressional Democrats' spending plans. And then California Democratic Congressman John Garamendi talks about wildfires in the West and the latest on legislation that would set national drinking water standards. Watch C-SPAN's Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Thursday morning. And be sure to join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.
In Savannah to welcome Team USA and get a first look inside the Olympic Village.
That's my company and my community.
Nothing on my skin, that's my new plan. Get Hy-Vee products for just 99 cents. Get Hy-Vee.
There's so much misinformation out there about the vaccine, and we are not seeing vaccinated patients dying from COVID. I've been doing this for 16 months, and when the vaccine came out, it was a miracle, and we all thought, yes, we can finally be over this. And to see a less than 40% vaccination rate, and to see, actual human beings dying and struggling for each breath over a vaccine, it's mind-boggling and heartbreaking.
So more than 170,000 people watched that video on YouTube and Facebook, and I hope that number is going to be many times that, Dr. Bolding. I hope people will go watch it now. One woman commented, she said you convinced her 3 children who are all in their 20s to get vaccinated, which is incredible. I mean, you're having an impact and you are saving lives, not just in literally saving lives, but by what you said. Have you been hearing more response to it, that there are people who watch that and it is the wake-up call they need?
I have. I've gotten, texts and messages from so many people that people I haven't talked to in a decade in some instances, that just a quick text and say, hey, dude, where do I get my vaccine? Because they know me and they know that I'm one of them. I'm from rural America. I was born and raised here. I don't have an agenda. I want to see less people on ventilators for a preventable illness. I don't think that's a lot to ask. So I hope that resonates with people.
Well, it does, and we can just hope that we can get those numbers, more and more people to see that and be grateful for someone like you. Dr. Boulding, thank you.
Thank you.
And next, our live town hall with President Biden in Cincinnati. So should he be worried about this message from Republicans?
The Democrats' response to these rising prices is to simply spend more.
Music was good to us. We feel like we're finally coming into our true calling.
Individuals and families build a solid path to a brighter future.
Then we're gonna kick it up a notch tomorrow. Sunny, smoky, but warmer and a bit more humid. 93 Sioux Falls, 99 Aberdeen, Pier 102, Rapid City 97. Hot again on Friday.
Keep your cool, everyone. That's our time. Thanks for watching.
Enjoy the evening.
The Washington Post, and Phil Rucker, Washington Post senior Washington correspondent, and they also are my colleagues. Welcome to the Readout. Thank you for being here. Carol, I'll start with you. Even though General Milley didn't directly comment on what's in your book, he did validate what you have in your book, didn't he?
That was definitely my read or readout, so to speak, of the events today at the press conference. I mean, Milley was there for one reason, but of course he was going to be asked a lot about this set of chapters that Phil and I excavated about that harrowing final, the final months of the Trump presidency. I think that General Milley is the kind of tough, straight shooter who would say, this is inaccurate, or I don't agree, or there's a nuance here that you need to know, if he felt that way.
And Phil, I want to have you talk about something here in your book. This is element 2. You write in I Alone Can Fix It. This is about Bill Barr, then Attorney General, that I find fascinating. It says, as spring wore on, Bill Barr came to believe that President Trump was squandering his hopes for re-election. Barr decided to talk straight to the boss, to tell Trump he was losing. Quote, I feel you are going to lose the election, Barr said. I feel you are actually losing touch with your own base. He keeps going. You're going to lose because there's going to be enough people who otherwise would vote for you who are just tired of the acrimony, the pettiness, the punching down and picking a fight at every moment, and the apparent chaos. And they're just going to say, we're tired of this. I'm not going to say the curse word, but it begins with an S. Phil, what I found fascinating about that is that Bill Barr was telling the president, you're losing touch with your base. How did he know that when, from those of us on the outside, it seemed as though Bill Barr was, the ultimate yes man for Trump?
Jonathan, it appeared from the outside throughout the presidency that Barr was the president's political hatchet man, his yes man, in some ways his personal lawyer. And yet behind the scenes, Barr did at moments, like the one you just described, try to talk tough to Trump. He did this also, by the way, when he was the Attorney General for President George H.W. Bush, warning him similarly that he thought Bush would lose re-election in 1992, and in fact he did. But Barr felt Trump was so undisciplined, so chaotic, so much drama every hour of every day that there would be exhaustion setting in among the electorate, and he turned out to be right.
I'm going to go to element 1, and this is something that you write in your book, I Alone Can Fix It, that, it sort of makes me, what we're talking about today in terms of the January 6th Commission, where you write, most of Trump's failings can be explained by a simple truth. He cared more about himself than the country, whether managing the coronavirus or addressing racial unrest or reacting to his election defeat. Trump prioritized what he thought to be his political and personal interests over the common good. And I thought of that in relation to today and what's happening with the January 6th Commission, because it seems like, well, Donald Trump was worried about himself when he was in the White House. What's happening today in Washington, it seems as though the Republican Party, or Trump's party, is still concerned about the former president, who remains concerned about himself. Carol, in the interviews that you and Philip did it seem like Donald Trump in any way has any regrets about what happened on the 6th, his role in it, or does he revel in it at all?
You know, Jonathan, it's such a good question because, as you know, from covering this presidency and watching it so up close, along with me and with Phil, this is a president who doesn't have regrets. And in fact, he only disclosed one regret to us, which I'll get to in a moment. But in our conversation with him in Mar-a-Lago, he clearly believes he was a wonderful president, and he clearly believes that supporters were trying to do what he wanted, as he said. They were trying to right a wrong, to stop a rigged election. Now, of course, he stoked that misinformation. He fed that lie. He excited and incited his supporters. And so them being there was literally a call and response. He has no regrets about that moment that he disclosed to us, other than to say, you know, mostly it was a loving crowd. Now, I will also tell you that the one thing he told Phil and I he regretted was that he was not able to buffalo his Secretary of Defense, his Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, and his Attorney General, Bill Barr, in pushing his particular wish, which was to unleash and sic the U.S. active duty military on Black Lives Matter protesters. That's what he feels sorry about.
And it's incredibly, it's so outrageous, and outrageous that he believes that, but also sort of stultifying that we have General Milley, Attorney General Bill Barr, and the former Defense Secretary to thank for being the adults in the room to stop it. One more question to you, Phil, real quickly. One of the things that you write about is the fact when you both interviewed Donald Trump, he sat down with you at Mar-a-Lago, but not in a private office or in private. He did it in the lobby of Mar-a-Lago.
Jonathan, it was the craziest scene. He brought us into the Mar-a-Lago for a 2.5-hour interview in the lobby and at the dinner hour. So hundreds of his guests, club members, were parading by, saying hello, coming by to tease him. Laura Ingraham, the Fox News host, was there and interrupted the interview. So did Kimberly Guilfoyle. And while we were talking about serious matters like January 6th, the Raw Bar people were setting up the buffet, the Bananas Foster station in the corner. It's one of those scenes that only happens down at Mar-a-Lago and with Donald Trump.
I always thought that those scenes only happen on Star Wars, but who am I? Carol Leonnig, Phil Rucker, co-authors of I Alone Can Fix It. Thank you very much for coming to the readout. Still ahead, Western wildfires blow a haze of smoke across the East Coast as the climate crisis spreads across the globe. The governor of one state being hit hard by wildfires joins me next.
Brian, it's a message that they should feel free to move about the cap and do it again. It's a message that says there will be zero costs imposed on you. If you think a statement from the United States, or frankly a statement from NATO, or a statement from any place else is going to change the conditions for the Chinese Communist Party, if you think this is going to slow down this activity, this cyber activity, I mean, it's just foolish to think that. And Brian, you've seen this before. We've all seen this before. It is worse when the United States draws red lines, when we say this is to be condemned or this is bad, and then we fail to take action. They see that as an idle threat. They see it as just a place they can drive a truck through. And I do not think this bodes well for our cybersecurity. I think the Chinese will come at this hard, and they'll come at it until the Biden administration gets it right and doesn't just put out pieces of paper with words, but takes real and significant action.
A couple of hours ago, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was green-lighted by this administration. Among Democrats that are upset by it is Senator Ben Cardin, as well as the former vice president nominee, or candidate, I should say, Tim Kaine. They say finish up the pipeline from Russia through Europe with a hub in Germany. You guys stopped it. You said that's going to jeopardize national security. We'd like to sell you natural gas, and we're not going to blow you up. They say it's the Trump administration's fault for letting 90% of it be done by the time they took office. What's your reaction?
Brian, this is dangerous and it is dumb. I cannot believe that they've lifted these sanctions, frankly, congressionally mandated. That is legal requirements that they had. I don't know how they got around it. I guess they found a place they thought they could make a waiver. But importantly, substantively, remember this. We had slowed this down significantly. We had it stopped. The German leadership knew it. The Russian leadership knew it as well. Yeah, they talked about 90% of the pipeline. That's just irrelevant. You can't flow crude oil through or natural gas through a 90% completed pipeline. You need 100%. And so this is just a ruse. This is a hide. They're cuddling up to the Germans. I suspect it's because they want to do some climate change deal with them. But this is bad for the Ukrainian people. It's bad for the people of Eastern Europe. And it poses a significant security threat to the United States and our NATO allies as well.
Mr. Secretary, I know how busy a week you had. You found some time for us. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Have a good evening.
You got it. Meanwhile, soon on Fox News Primetime. The short shorts are too short. Why female Olympians are fed up with their uniforms. But first, the U.S. women's soccer team takes a knee, but thankfully, one American sports legend is still standing up for America. You know him well, George Foreman.
Camp Kitchen. She's been volunteering here since she was released more than 5 years ago, after serving 16 years of a life sentence for a drug conspiracy conviction.
It made me think about my daughter and the times that I was gone, because when I left, she was 8. So that's a different feeling. These are little girls, and a lot of time when you at school, you shame, you're not talking about this. So to bring them together like this and make it complete for them, like understanding each other, makes my day.
She's free now because Barnett fought for her, advocating for 6 years to get her released, until President Barack Obama granted Jones clemency in 2015. Barnett documented that fight in her memoir last year, A Knock at Midnight. In total, Barnett's helped free more than 30 of her clients facing life sentences for drug crimes.
I see her and I have such a mixed batch of emotions of just happiness that she's free, sadness to even think that the laws of this country would allow her to be sentenced to life, and to think about what that means. Sharonda Jones was serving the same amount of time in prison as the Unabomber. What sense does that make?
The camp is a source of comfort for the girls, but counselors push them to consider what they're really capable of. Over an hour after her first attempt at archery, Lila learns what she can do. And 17-year-old Natalia Lizardo pens her first lines of poetry ever.
I am strong. I am not an object to be locked away, but a woman who pushes through these challenges and comes out stronger. I am my mother's daughter, and I am Natalie.
Natalie's mother, Sonia Lopez, served 6 months in prison and was released in 2016, just 2 months before she passed away.
Well, my mom went through a lot of things raising us. She raised 5 kids alone, so she really had to find strength in herself to be able to take care of us.
And she passed that down to you?
Yeah.
You know that about yourself? Does it feel good to write this on paper and say it out loud?
Yeah. I've been through like a lot of hard things in my life, so I like to believe that I'm stronger than before I had to go through them.
Barnett knows the camp is an escape. After 3 days here, the girls go home, and the struggle to stay connected to their mothers continues.
We can only do what we can to help reduce the trauma that is a result of maternal incarceration, and the bond and the love between the mothers and daughters in our program is unconditional. You know, they're our mamas. They're much more than a 7-digit prison number assigned by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Amna Navaz in Dallas.
With summer in full swing, you may be wondering what books to take along on vacation or enjoy right at home. Jeffrey Brown talks with 2 writers who have answers to that question. It's part of our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
Books helped many of us get through the last year. To help us keep up the reading as we head into summer, we're joined by Glory Edam, founder of the book club Well Read Black Girl. Her new anthology on girlhood comes out this fall. And Maureen Corrigan, book critic for NPR's Fresh Air and a professor at Georgetown University. And it's nice to see both of you. Glory, you want to start with some fiction?
Oh, wow. Right now, I'm obsessed with Caitlin Greenidge's Liberty. It's a great book, just full of rich historical detail. It's inspired by the first Black doctors during the Reconstruction era, and she takes us on this beautiful ride, learning about the young woman who is like trying to find herself, full of great detail. Also, when it comes to fiction, I'm loving rom-coms. So Jasmine Gilroy has a new book coming out, as well as Tia Williams. Tia Williams' book is called 7 Days in June, and it is that kind of story where you feel like you're talking to your best friend, and a little bit of cringy moments, but like a lot of heartfelt laughter and joy. It's a great title.
Maureen Corrigan, give us a few fiction novels.
The writer I hope everybody will read, especially if they've never read her before, is Laurie Colwin. Laurie Colwin died in the 1990s. She wrote 5 novels, 2 short story collections, and 2 collections of food writing. She is wonderful. She is smart. She is so funny and droll and emotionally complex. And 2 of her publishers are reprinting everything she wrote. So I would grab Family Happiness and any of her other wonderful novels to really celebrate what we hope is the end of this pandemic. The other book I'd recommend for the summer is the final revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. It's a wonderful kind of simulacrum of a rock oral history, and so it's fun to read because lots of different styles, but also very moving about people trying to pursue their dreams and what they do to try to achieve those dreams.
How about a couple of nonfiction picks?
Oh,
Glory?
I am reading Somebody's Daughter by Ashley Ford right now, and it is really insightful. It looks at Ashley's life as she is trying to really understand what has happened between her and her father. Her father was incarcerated, and she's like coming of age and trying to really mend their relationship. It's a very endearing book. I'm also reading Goodbye Again by Johnny Sun, and that's a collection of essays and reflections, and he has stories looking at plants and thinking about what they mean and where they are in the world, or leaving home and being in another space and what it means to welcome others into your home and what you call home. He does a great job of just like welcoming the reader in.
Now, Maureen, before we started, you told me you were really immersed in fiction, but how about a couple of nonfiction picks?
Yeah, I have a few picks. Republic of Detours by Scott Borchert just came out, and it's about the Federal Writers Project during the Great Depression. Government wanted to put broke writers to work and came up with this idea of putting people to work writing guides to all of the then 48 states. People like Ralph Ellison, Zora Neale Hurston, John Cheever, they were put to work on this project. It's an amazing story, tons of wonderful anecdotes and really vivid writing. I also would recommend Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Notes on Grief for people who want to get in touch with, again, some of the heavier emotions of this period that we've just been through. She's writing about the death of her father. She's a spectacular writer, and she really probes those emotions of what it means when life just feels really fragile.
I wonder what you see happening now in terms of reading impact from the last year or publication impact.
The last few months have been the most diverse list of books that I've seen in my 30 plus years as a reviewer. So I do think that there's much more of a responsiveness on the part of the publishing industry to begin to try to diversify what has been historically a very white industry. And the other thing that's happening that's so interesting, I'm a big fan of suspense fiction. And I would say that almost every suspense novel that I pick up these days has a plot line about cultural appropriation or appropriation of someone else's words. The Plot by Jean Hanff Horowitz, who's a wonderful suspense writer. The plot takes place in an MFA program, a lot of resentment and bad behavior, but also then this plot about a man appropriating a woman's words. The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Delilah Harris is also a story about appropriation in part. It's about a young woman of color in the publishing industry, again, historically a very white industry, but it's got this kind of subplot about stealing someone else's story. So I think there's this paranoia out there about people not having control of their own stories, really filtering into suspense fiction.
And Glory, what?
Even Olympians are not immune from the cruelty of COVID-19. The pandemic striking some of the world's top athletes, including a U.S. gymnast just days before the opening ceremony. Catching COVID early this year cost Priscilla Loomis more than 8 weeks of training. The American Antiguan high jumper still has trouble breathing.
Absolutely devastated. I am heartbroken. I'm in healing right now. I'm in mourning.
Loomis says she ignored doctors' advice and kept training, but failed to qualify for Tokyo 2020.
This was it. This was my final curtain bow.
British rower Una Cousins qualified for the Olympics in March 2020. She came down with a serious case of long COVID, leaving her with chronic fatigue.
I'm really struggling to exercise still. Kind of by comparison, I was doing like 35 hours of training a week when I was well, and now I can probably do like 3 20-minute sessions in a week, super lightly.
And this is more than a year later.
Yeah, I just really struggled with really intense fatigue.
Cousins calls her coronavirus battle an emotional roller coaster.
We are dealing with a disease that we didn't even know how to define a year ago.
CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta says researchers don't fully know why the virus hits some people harder than others.
So if you're an athlete, you could have symptoms from COVID that last a long time and really impact your performance for a long time as well.
Are these athletes putting themselves at risk if they're coming here?
I think it's really tough to justify bringing 206 countries, states, and territories together in the middle of a pandemic.
A risk Vinesh Phogat is willing to take. The Indian wrestler is a gold medal favorite, #1 in her category. She says postponing competition by a year was an even bigger challenge than catching the coronavirus.
I had to start my training again from scratch. It was very difficult.
Surging cases in Japan and the world mean Olympians won't have fans in the stands cheering them on. Nobody knows if nearly empty venues will be enough to stop the Summer Games from becoming a super spreader event. At Tokyo 2020, not just Olympic dreams, lives are on the line.
The head of the World Health Organization is here in Tokyo. He says before the Olympic flame is extinguished, Aaron, 100,000 people around the world, 100,000 more people will die from COVID. Now, we know at least 5 USA athletes have now been knocked out because of the virus, but because a lot of these athletes are vaccinated, doctors say their chances are good because the cases are much more mild, even asymptomatic when people are vaccinated, as opposed to those who aren't.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And wow, does it look beautiful there by Will. All right. Well, next, our exclusive town hall with President Biden. It is just a few moments away. We'll be right back.
Not everybody wants to sit.
I think he's on a boat. He's on a boat.
Oh, he's a boat.
It feels like real progress. Camp Lida.
Getting COVID meant a potential miscarriage or death.
Eliquis may increase your bleeding risk if you take certain medicines. Tell you
what you cannot do. You know, people told me I can't make free throws. I made my free throws tonight, and I'm a freaking champion. I've been up like this.
And freaking hungry.
Can I have, please, a 50-piece Mac Minis, 50 exactly, not 51, not 49, chicken minis, yes, 50.
To honor snapping a 50-year title drought with a 50-point performance, a drive-through meal for the champ. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
And you've got to feel uplifted by that, no matter which team you're for. And on the NewsHour Online right now, we look at 4 sports making their debut at the Tokyo Olympics. And the
more important to me than the safety and well-being of my family and patients.
The air is those western wildfires putting the smoke into our region. 89 in Rapid City with a light north breeze. Here's a look at the temperatures. They are warmest in the central part of South Dakota. We're pushing toward 100 degrees, the central part of the state, thanks to that south wind and, of course, the sunshine, albeit hazy. Here's we have partly cloudy skies here in the east. I should mention, there was a thundershower right in the Pennington-Custer County line earlier. It is now fizzled out. Overnight tonight, clear to partly cloudy, very warm, upper 60s to low 70s. Then tomorrow, a little hotter, a little more humid with that south wind, 93 Sioux Falls, 99 in Aberdeen, 102 in Pierre. This is KELO Weather Now.
Glaze. You could serve it with powdered sugar, like we have over here with a spot of tea.
Or no symptoms. Humira can lower your ability to fight infections.
Talk about the appointments to the January 6th Select Committee. The rhetoric that we have heard from the minority leader is disingenuous. The attack on this building on January 6th was the worst attack on this Capitol since 1814. It was an attack on our Constitution. We supported what would have been the very best option, which was a bipartisan independent commission. The minority leader opposed that. He lobbied against it in the Senate, and the Senate blocked it. The American people deserve to know what happened. The people who did this must be held accountable. There must be an investigation that is nonpartisan, that is sober, that is serious, that gets to the facts wherever they may lead. And at every opportunity, the minority leader has attempted to prevent the American people from understanding what happened, to block this investigation. Today, the Speaker objected to 2 Republican members. She accepted 3 others. She objected to 2, one of whom may well be a material witness to events that led to that day, that led to January 6th. The other, who disqualified himself by his comments in particular over the last 24 hours, demonstrating that he is not taking this seriously. He is not dealing with the facts of this investigation, but rather viewed it as a political platform. This investigation must go forward. The idea that anybody would be playing politics with an attack on the United States Capitol is despicable and is disgraceful. And I am absolutely dedicated and committed to making sure that this investigation holds those accountable who did this and ensures that it never happens again. And the American people deserve that, and that is what we're going to do.
Totally out of the blue, but again, something to probably show before we go.
Dispute. He didn't hit you, did he? Because if you tell me he took a swing
to avoid discharging anything into the street that they should, then that helps us a lot. It's a cool, unique way to get people's attention to something as mundane and boring as a storm sewer inlet. It might help start some conversations about what people think a storm sewer inlet is for, and hopefully it will generate some questions that come our way at Public Works Environmental, just to help educate people that didn't.
And if you felt, sir. Absolutely. Hold on. Does anybody have a question for the governor and senator? Anybody have a question for the governor or senator? We just talked about
the questions about the internet. I called on President Biden. We have the capability to do it. We need Biden to support it, and we will get internet to the people of Cuba.
Let me ask the crowd. Are you angry
this is
Biden? Okay, you wanted to ask a question or make a comment?
Help Venezuela. What can we do now for the people of
Venezuela, so it doesn't become the next Cuba.
Well, the first thing I would say about Venezuela is there is no Maduro without Cuba supporting him. The second thing is that people have forgotten on the day after the protest, they tried to basically kidnap the actual interim president of Venezuela. Right. They tried to move hard on those people. So I think we have to stay on. And unfortunately, on that day, Biden, the same time as they were trying to abduct Juan Guaido, Biden was lifting one sanction that Trump had put in place.
The only question is,
you know, on the
When you think about it, think about this, the minute Cuba is free, that could then be a domino effect, maybe?
So they're the #1 source of support for the Maduro regime. They're the #1 support for Nicaragua. They've been the source of everything bad in the Western Hemisphere for 60 years.
Right. Now, without Cuba, there is no Maduro, there is no Ortega, there is none of these guerrillas trying to destabilize Colombia. They are the source of all evil in this Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's move over here a little bit. I want to say this, let me get to this guy, this person. Okay, I'll tell you what. You see, look, if we can get the camera, when we come back, you're dressed in blood, freedom across here. We'll continue. We are at the Versailles, we're in Little Havana, we're in Miami, as people standing in solidarity with the people and the freedom movement going on in Cuba, which has been underreported by the news media and frankly ignored by the president for the most part. We'll continue straight ahead from Miami.
Freedom for Cuba!
Today I'm going to show you how to install a smart outdoor camera. First, you grab one of these, then get rid of the instructions. Next, have Vivint come install your entire smart security system for you, because ain't nobody got time for this.
Do you struggle?
All people. But then you have to have that a legal strategy, and then you have to have a legislative strategy, and then you have to have a way of framing issues in a moral form that allows people to see their connections. And then the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and it was the Texas Poor People's Campaign that invited us to Texas. They said, look, in Texas, we got 13 million poor and low wealth people in the state, 5 million people who don't make a living wage. In Texas, it requires 101 hours of work a week if you work $7.25 at a minimum wage. We have to find a way to bring all of those people together and help them understand that the same forces that promote systemic racism and push poverty and ecological devastation, denial of health care and the war economy and the false moral narrative, religious nationalists are the same people. And if they are cynical enough to be together, we have to be smart enough to come together, and we have to stay there long enough. You know, Moral Monday in North Carolina went on for 3 years, plus we fought a court battle for 4 years. But we also have to say in this moment, states cannot do this by themselves. We have to have federal legislation. If we don't get this For the People's Act, then that means you are for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce over the United States Constitution. You want dark money over public money. You want to end same-day registration, early voting, and opportunity to vote. And what you want is a narrow opportunity for narrowing the opportunities for people to vote. And we can't do this state by state. We need federal legislation. We also can't have people saying, well, let's just get the Voting Rights Act. No, that protects you after the fact or in pre-clearance before the fact. In order to deal with what's happening right now, we have to have the For the People's Act. But when you mobilize, Rachel, you have to connect the dots. And too often what happens is we get black people over here and white people over here and brown people over here and Latino people over here. And that silos are important sometimes. But in this moment, when we're talking about these kinds of attacks on our democracy, we have to have a coming together. And that's what you're going to see. In fact, on the stage on the 31st, the only people that are going to speak are poor and low income, impacted people, moral leaders, and activists. That's who's going to be talking to the nation that day.
The Reverend Dr. William Barber, president of Repairers of the Breach and the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Beto O'Rourke, former Democratic congressman from Texas, the founder of Powered by People. Gentlemen, thank you for helping us understand this tonight and talking us through it. I really appreciate you both taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Again, the march that they are announcing will be held July 27th through July 30th. It starts in Georgetown, Texas. It ends in Austin, Texas. They're describing it as a Selma to Montgomery style march. It is a 27-mile march from Georgetown to Austin. They're going to do that over the course of those 4 days. And then the day after that, July 31st, a rally at the Austin State Capitol, all designed to nationalize the voting rights fight in Texas for federal voting backstop protections. We'll be right back.
Start your day with all the support you need.
By the way, we should point out that Kevin McCarthy may have made all that calculus, and he may have discussed it with President Trump when he sat down with him just a few days ago as this whole thing was coming to the fore. So, I mean, you're right, he wants to be Speaker of the House, and that is his sine qua non. That is all he is about. And all of these considerations about the well-being of our democracy and what happened on January 6th, those are secondary conditions. Those are secondary issues for Kevin McCarthy. The question is, should it be for the United States Congress? Is that healthy for the country?
I disagree that they would have been able to wreck or derail this commission. Would they have asked questions that, folks didn't like? Maybe. Would they have brought up information that people don't think is germane? Maybe. But ultimately, this commission, to have public legitimacy, needs to have bipartisan buy-in. You're correct, whoever said earlier that, they had a chance to do this 5 and 5 and they passed on that. But if what you want to happen is some public legitimacy about getting to the bottom of this, how can you throw off the Republicans that the Republican leader wants to have and then try to go out and get that legitimacy, even if you don't like the Republican she nominated, or that Kevin McCarthy nominated? So
even when she announced the thing, McCarthy said this was going to be a partisan exercise. It was pre-branded. So it doesn't matter what she did. They were going to say the same thing. And I disagree with you. You're not giving Jordan the credit he deserves. He's an anarchist within the legislative process. And I think a lot of the Republicans you hang around with would acknowledge that as well.
I think there are a lot of Republicans who believe that, look, Jordan is representative of more than just Jim Jordan in this conference. There's a lot of people that believe what he does on a number of different issues. I think Pelosi should have left him in. I'm just telling you, to take away the legitimacy, to give Kevin McCarthy the argument that she gave him today, which is to say, look at this, these partisans, you can't trust these folks. We tried to give them some Republicans, they wouldn't take it. I think she made a mistake, and now this commission is always going to be argued to be political by Republicans, whereas if you had some Republicans on there, at least she could have said, look, I gave Jim Jordan his say, and here was the report anyway.
And what about Liz Cheney? I mean, is she not?
I said Jim Jordan was a Republican in good standing, and I will say she is not presently in that conference a Republican in good standing. So, for the argument of this panel about who should be on it, she doesn't count because the Republicans have already decided she doesn't represent.
If that's the barometer, though, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a Republican of good standing. I mean, so if he had put her on the committee, would that have been okay as well?
Look, she's a pretty junior member of the conference. He picked
that's one deficiency.
He picked two people who are representative of a good chunk of the conference, who were very prominent during impeachment, by the way, which a lot of Republicans view this as, well, we participated in that, so why wouldn't we participate in this? And I think it was pretty apparent he was going to go down this road to begin with. So
do you think he discussed this with Trump?
I don't know, but I will tell you this. You know my views on January 6th. It was heinous.
I know you feel that way.
And I'm still vibratingly angry about it today. I think we ought to get to the bottom of it. I think Pelosi ought to let this go forth. And I ultimately believe the most important review is what's being done at the Justice Department. I hope all these people go to jail for violating the sanctity of our democracy.
It is still remarkable to me Liz Cheney is no longer a Republican in good standing, according to the Republican
That's
Party.
exactly what I was just thinking. And based, especially knowing you, Scott, and especially based on what you just said about January 6th, what does it say about the GOP? That somebody who stands up and says, I think that what happened was wrong. I think that the lies that were being perpetuated by the then president and all of the people who, according to this latest book, including Jim Jordan, who she claimed was responsible in part for January 6th. What does it say about the party that she is not in good standing because she wants to get to the bottom of it, and those like Jim Jordan are in good standing with the GOP leadership?
Yeah, I mean, it says we're wrestling with this issue internally, and right now, people with her view and the way she's gone about it has angered not just the Jim Jordans of the world, but there are even more moderate rank and file members who don't think she handled herself properly. The conference has spoken on that. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we have to keep in mind here that Kevin McCarthy decided to take his balls and go home. He could have had 3 members on that committee, one of whom did vote to not certify the election, Congressman Nels, and 2 others who didn't. But he chose not to do that for a reason, and it's because there's greater political benefit for Republicans in not playing ball at all. I don't necessarily buy the argument that he really wanted to have some veneer of legitimacy by putting Jim Jordan on this committee. I think he wanted to not participate altogether, and Pelosi was put in a tough spot. She had no choice but to do what she did, but it just happens to also be the outcome that I think McCarthy thinks is most advantageous to her.
Thanks, everybody. Second hour of 360 is just ahead. Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff is going to join us to talk about what is next for January 6th House Select Committee now that the Republican leadership is boycotting the investigation. Schiff is obviously a Democratic member of the panel. We'll be right back.
Cookies and wires.
The Senate. I think they recognize that with that stability, they can plan, they can make determinations about expansion opportunities.
20 years at great expense to the United States and other international allies. But there's other factors that determine outcomes. The 2 most important combat multipliers actually is will and leadership. And this is going to be a test now of the will and leadership of the Afghan people, the Afghan security forces, and the government of Afghanistan. Right now, you talked about the narrative that the Taliban are winning. There clearly is a narrative out there that the Taliban are winning. In fact, they are propagating an inevitable victory on their behalf. They're dominating a lot of the airwaves on that sort of thing. I would tell you that as of today, more or less, I guess it's about 212, 213, it's in that range, 200s. The district centers are in Taliban control. It's about half of the 419 that are out there. You've got 34 provincial capitals in Afghanistan. None of them have been seized as of today by the Taliban, although the Taliban is putting pressure on the outskirts of probably about half of them, 17 of them, in fact. And what they're trying to do is isolate the major population centers. They're trying to do the same thing to Kabul. And roughly speaking, order of magnitude, a significant amount of territory has been seized over the course of 6, 8, 10 months sort of thing by the Taliban. So strategic momentum appears to be sort of with the Taliban. The Afghan security forces, though, are consolidating their forces. So part of this is they're giving up district centers in order to consolidate their forces because they're taking an approach to protect the population. And most of the population lives in the provincial capitals and the capital city of Kabul. So they are right now, as we speak, adjusting forces to consolidate into the provincial capitals in Kabul. And that's why I say it remains to be seen over the rest of the summer. Right now, violence is relatively low because of Eid. But after Eid, we're going to find out. We're going to find out the levels of violence, whether it's going to go up, stay the same. There's a possibility of a negotiated outcome that's still out there. There's a possibility of a complete Taliban takeover or a possibility of any number of other scenarios, breakdowns, warlordism, all kinds of other scenarios that are out there. We're monitoring very closely. I don't think the end game is yet written.
We have time for a couple more, Barb. I wanted to ask both of you a question, somewhat for both of you following up on your recent House testimony. Mr. Secretary, for you first, could you explain in more detail your views on when you think and under what circumstances critical race theory should be an appropriate part of military education? I know you were asked about it in that hearing and you addressed it briefly, but I'd like to better understand your views on that. And for you, General Milley, in that hearing, you said to Congress that you wanted, in your words, to understand white rage and what it is that caused thousands of people to assault the Capitol and try to overturn the Constitution of the U.S. What caused that? I want to find that out. Can you offer a more detailed explanation? What led you to the conclusion of white rage? And since you've talked about it publicly before Congress, in your view, what is white rage and why and when should the U.S. military be concerned about that? Thank you.
Barb, you've heard me say that the critical race theory is not something that this department teaches, professes, embraces. You've also heard a couple of people at academic institutions say that, you know, they have required this to be reading for their students in specific courses. But because that's the case, does not mean that this department embraces this theory. And I stand by what I said earlier. And Barbara, I don't want us to get distracted with the critical race conversation. This department will be diverse. It will be inclusive, and we're going to look like the country that we support and defend. And you know, our leadership will look like what's in the ranks of our military. And so I'm committed to that. This department's committed to that. The chairman's committed to that. And that's what we're going to stay focused on. And so, you know, we're not going to spend too much time debating the merits of this theory or any other theory. We're going to stay focused on making sure that we create the right force to defend this country and promote our values. And I know that's important to you and all of you in this room as well, Barb, but I thank you for that question.
So, Barb, in a minute or two left, first of all, I'm not going to address specifically white rage or black rage or Asian rage or Irish rage or English rage or German rage or any other rage, right? The events of the 6th of January happened. Those are all going to get sorted out. Historians will sort it out. Commissions will sort it out, and so on. But I do think it's important that we as a professional military not only understand foreign countries and foreign cultures and foreign societies. That's important that we do that. But we also need to understand our own society and understand the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and the society they're coming from. And I think that's important for leadership to study. Thank you.
You said the words white rage.
Yeah, I said I'm not going to discuss it right now. I think it's a very complicated topic, and we don't have the time to go into the nuance of it right this minute. I can do that later. I'll be happy to do that later. But right now, it's not a good time to do that. It's too complicated.
We only got time for one more, guys, and I want to get to yeah.
Fire exercise is a sham. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the report had already been drafted. I can imagine. Chapter 1, Trump incited the insurrection. Chapter 2, Trump supporters on social media helped drive the violence. Chapter 3, the Capitol Police infiltrated by Trump supporters missed obvious signs. Chapter 4, must flag potential threats online before they even act on those threats. Number 5, must spend billions to beef up security and limit public access to the Capitol, if at all possible. Now, for some time, it's been obvious to most fair-minded Americans that Democrats need January 6th in 2022 as much as they needed the pandemic in 2020. They're not problems to be solved. They're crises to exploit.
Now, when it seems Speaker Pelosi, for one, might already know this lesson.
Tell us, why did you reject him? Why did you reject me for somebody who would care about that?
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He served as a House impeachment manager in the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. He's the author of Endgame, Inside the Impeachments of Donald J. Trump. Congressman Swalwell, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. You and I actually had this discussion in real time way back then when people were saying it's politically fraught to pursue impeachment against Donald Trump, particularly since there's not much chance he was going to be convicted of it anyway. And you and others made the argument that that shouldn't be part of the calculus. Either you as members of Congress do what you are called upon to do and what the Constitution dictates that you do, or you don't. But it shouldn't be about whether it's politically fraught or politically advantageous.
Thank you, Ali. And it was effective, right? We did not obtain a conviction in the Senate, but by holding him accountable in the first impeachment, we were actually able to shine a light on this effort to have Ukraine put dirt on Joe Biden, and we stopped it. And Ukraine was not able to ultimately run the campaign that Donald Trump was inviting them to run. So shining a light, although it did not remove Donald Trump, it prevented Ukraine from doing that. And I just want to draw a distinction between what happened with Ukraine, where you had Masha Yovanovitch, Fiona Hill, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman coming forward, and they stopped that corruption scheme. We're now reading about all of these actors who were preparing for a coup because Donald Trump was contesting the election, but they didn't have the gumption or the courage to come forward before the coup. They're telling their story now to vindicate themselves in books, but had they done that, perhaps we would not have seen the Capitol stormed the way it was and democracy nearly die as it did on January 6th.
You know, Jim Jordan, whom Speaker Pelosi has rejected from being a member of this committee, Jim Jordan had said this is just impeachment number 3. You've been involved in the impeachments. You've written about the impeachments. Why? What is your response to people who say this is impeachment 3?
He's unserious, and this is somebody who was holding the gas cans when the arson took place and now wants to be on the committee that investigates the arson. And Speaker Pelosi recognizes that democracy is on life support, and this is very binary. Either you are a part of the team that's trying to resurrect it, or you are trying to pull the plug. And Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, who was hanging out with an insurrectionist, they want to pull the plug while we need a serious investigation so that we can ensure and guarantee every American this will never happen again.
So I want to read to you an op-ed by Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman in the Washington Post today. They post something interesting. They're saying efforts at a real examination of arguably the worst outbreak of political violence in modern times and efforts to protect our democracy more broadly will not be bipartisan. These things will be done by Democrats alone. The lesson McCarthy is with this committee, the more likely it will be to undertake a genuine and comprehensive accounting. So Waldman and Sargent are making the point that if the serious work needs to be done, it may be just as well that McCarthy's not populating his side of the team.
That's exactly right. And by the way, he had a chance to have an independent bipartisan commission that he and Mitch McConnell walked away from. And as I was saying, this is so binary right now. Either you're trying to resurrect and revive democracy or you're trying to kill it, that when people say to me, well, Liz Cheney, I don't agree with her on, where she stands on abortion or where she stands on taxes, I say, well, that, give me the problem that democracy is around in 3 years, that we can have that debate with her. But right now, she is standing up for democracy. So we need her. Same thing to Adam Kinzinger. And so, yes, we need to move swiftly right now. And having Jim Jordan on the committee just for the sake of quote unquote bipartisanship, I don't think that goes to saving democracy.
Yeah, and so Jim Jordan and Banks have both said they're there to save conservatism and things like that. Liz Cheney actually made the point, let's play it, that there's no room for partisanship in this exploration. Listen to what she said.
There must be an investigation that is nonpartisan, that is sober, that is serious, that gets to the facts wherever they may lead. And at every opportunity, the minority leader has attempted to prevent the American people from understanding what happened, to block this investigation. This investigation must go forward. The idea...
Custom Ink has hundreds of products to help you feel connected.
Why? Perhaps because some of it may frustrate their preferred narrative, we don't know. Democrats' credibility, though, is shot for many reasons. Their 4-year witch hunt against the Trump presidency, as they showcase their own slime balls like Eric Swalwell, please. Their ongoing efforts to undermine U.S. border security by allowing 1 million migrants into the country during a pandemic, but they're supposed to be all for law and order. In their grand conspiracy claims, my personal favorite was this alleged Republican plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. More on that in a moment.
Was involved that day. But right now, what I think is just so awful, Allie, the Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police, who fought in hand-to-hand combat for hours that day, they are seeing the Republicans sympathize with the cop killers, vote against security assistance to make sure this doesn't happen again, vote against the gold medal being awarded to those officers, blaming police and suggesting that the FBI was behind it, and then today, the final insult to just walk away and not be there next week when 4 officers will animate just how horrible that day was.
Congressman, good to talk to you as always. Thank you for joining us. Eric Swalwell, Congressman from California. He's the author of Endgame, Inside the Impeachment of Donald J. Trump. All right, coming up and right on cue, after raising the debt ceiling 3 times during the previous administration without a hitch, Mitch McConnell opens the door to weaponizing the debt limit again. Senator Chris Van Hollen joins us after the break.
Now I'm working to end veteran homelessness with the help prized, but where
was the Mullinex's daughter Rachel. Bruce